I never heard the word criminality. And we heard from the good Dr. Veterinarian here about the criminal elements that have wreaked havoc on businesses, on communities, on neighborhoods, and the activity associated with the crimes that are committed by the homeless people. Don't you think that there's got to be some action about enforcing laws, trespassing laws, drug use laws, public displays such as urination and things of those natures? There is something that's working, at least we're being told that it is, and that's the transitional setting where folks who are brought into that setting because of criminal activity by law enforcement are given a choice. They can either take the jail route or the services route, and it seems that once they're brought into that setting, that they go to the services route. I didn't hear criminality or enforcement of law or making sure that the homeless encampments aren't rife with crime. Low barrier settings are historically hotbeds for criminal activity. And that's been proven in Pima County time and time again. Low barrier means come on in. We don't care what kind of condition you're in, and you can just stay here. And it ends up being a place for drug dealing and human trafficking and all other nefarious crimes. I don't hear anything about enforcing the law. And maybe if we enforce the law, we get more response from folks who don't want to take the services.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie, I'll take the first part and then I'll pivot to Deputy County Administrator Holmes. With respect to criminality, the status of homelessness itself is not a crime. Behavior while in status...
Ma'am,
yeah.
Madam Chair, no one is saying that if you don't have a house, you're a criminal.
Okay.
No one is saying that because you're not living in a shelter, you're a criminal. We're talking about criminal activity about people who are living on the street. And it has nothing to do with having a house.
Okay.
That's not a law. It's not a law-breaking situation when somebody doesn't have a house. It's what they do on the street that we're seeing the indications of what's going on.
Well, and let's let her answer and let staff answer. Yeah, go ahead.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie, thank you for the distinction. It is important because it sometimes gets conflated. So thank you, and I respectfully apologize for misconstruing your statement. And it is important to note that some of the behavior that we see out on the streets is not exactly behavior associated with individuals who are experiencing homelessness. So that because there are indications that we have from staff and outreach efforts, anecdotal at best, not conclusive data, where services have been attempted to be offered to connect individuals to shelter or other programs, and statements have been made that they are not homeless, but they simply cannot get high at home. So I think it's important that the behavior doesn't necessarily translate to status. The last piece that I would state with respect to low barrier settings, traditionally low barrier settings means I don't know of a single low barrier setting where people can go in with drug paraphernalia or weapons. But the low barrier that we're talking about in this context is to remove the conditions of participation as a condition of receiving a bed. And what I mean to say is a condition of engaging in drug treatment or any other programs as a condition of having a bed.
Madam Chair, if you talk to the owners of the restaurant off of I-10, I think it's called the Saddle, the Golden Saddle or the Silver Saddle, there's a low barrier housing facility right next to them that has been wreaking havoc on that community. And low barrier means you can access this housing regardless of your physical condition. You could come in with drugs, addiction, mental health problems, just whatever is the situation that you're experiencing, you can have access to this low barrier housing. And that's what's causing the problems. They sat right here and talked about what they're experiencing. And again, you haven't even addressed what are we doing to prevent the criminality part?
Respectfully, this department is not law
Chair,
enforcement.
I'm asking her.
No, I understand, but
I know you can cover for it, and
respectfully,
I understand that.
you can
but
make
I'd
a
like
comment.
to
I
hear
will
what
too.
you
I
have to
understand
say.
that. But what
If
I
you
will
want to
say,
talk over me, I can talk over you.
no. What I will say is that I think that it's important for you to visit some of these shelters before we do presume a lot about what's happening in those facilities. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Deputy County Administrator Holmes, because I do think it's important, if you're going to ask a question to staff, to allow them to finish the answer, and then we can follow up with more questions. Go ahead.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie, as we've been diving in this space, I want to acknowledge your concern, because I think we're migrating to, and particularly we look at number 4, reference to Supervisor Scott's point earlier, there are really 2 pathways that we're working on simultaneously, and it's becoming clear to me. There's the voluntary pathway, which we talk a lot about with the housing piece, and then there's the involuntary pathways that I think isn't lost in our conversations, but not highlighted in this presentation right now. Really, the involuntary pieces really are I kind of see it as 2 different things. One is involuntary in reference to people who are a danger to self or their others, which can be because of their drug situation or because of mental health problems. That system right now is the CRC, where we take people to. I can tell you right now there's an acknowledgement that the drug problem is larger than it ever has been, and is more apparent and more visible, right? And so as we're looking at these discussions with the help of Supervisor Lee, we're also looking at ways in which we can enhance the services at the CRC. We've seen record number of people being taken there back in July, and then more recently, I believe this month. That's telling us that law enforcement is taking more people over there involuntarily, but what's happening is there's no recapturing of people, and I mean that less as a kind of a force, but once they leave CRC, they go back to where they're going to be using, and it becomes worse for them. And so some of the conversations we're engaged with Supervisor Lee is particularly looking at enhancing the CRC to make sure that there's more cleaner ways in which we're transferring people to services from that involuntary type of activity. The other involuntary location is the jail. And one of the things that, as you pointed out, for people who are committing crimes, the jail is a tool, right, to begin to start looking at ways in which we can reduce some of that criminality. One of the reasons the Transition Center has been working in its way into some data points there is because people leaving the jail are forced to talk to someone there, right? And talk to someone to see if they can get them service. It's not 100%. I can tell you there are a lot of people refusing services, but there's that touch point there at the jail. What we're still working on is not just people leaving pretrial, but people who are leaving the exit of the jail and actually forcing them to kind of have some conversations with us. Some of the system improvement work that ties to number 4 is really working with our initial appearance judges to ensure that there are some ways in which at the initial appearance that people can be asked, and this is part of the conditions release, that they must go to the transition center and have a conversation upon release. We have a few judges that are doing that right now, but it's not systemic. So that's the ongoing conversation. But I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the system improvement work that's part of an involuntary piece broken into the CRC and the jail, as well as a voluntary piece that we're seeing much less success in that space right now. And we believe because of people's issues with addictions in some of those areas, but criminality continues to be an issue that we must address. Those are 2 areas that I know we're looking at. I'll point out one more piece that I think is in addition, Supervisor Christie, to the gentleman there, which is now the VetSec that we have on the loop in the evenings. We're about 1 week in. Purpose of the VetSec is to enforce our rules around the loop. Now, they are going to the vicinities around the loop, and also I believe this week we're going to be stopping at some of those businesses to describe a little bit what they're doing. A lot of it is a deterrent. They don't have arrest authority, but I can tell you, I'm getting the nightly reports. Last night, they dealt with a situation, sheriff responded, and they're able to take care of that situation. So I think that's another tool that's being enhanced right now. But I want to make sure for our Board of Supervisors that we are looking at this more collectively. I guess today we're focusing more on the voluntary end of things, and which is another system that needs to improve as well.
Thank you. We have